Bali for having me here. I'm very excited to be here and share what I learned. So again, my name is Crystal, and I have this inexplicable desire to rough it. I don't know where it comes from, but if it means that I don't know where I'm going to sleep night after night, if it means I have to take a bath in a river, or if it means that I have to rely on strangers for absolutely anything, chances are I'm up for it. I also used to work at Room for Dessert, that little dessert place around the corner from here, and I struggled with one thing in particular, sourcing. When I first started, I was wide-eyed and eager at the prospect of using all the biodiverse bounty that Indonesia had to offer, but it really was not like that. I woke up from that dream pretty quickly. As all you veteran F&B people here know, it's more like a 2-hour car drive to the boat, 36-hour boat ride to the island, another 3-hour bike ride to the village, and an hour walk to the farm, and then all the way back. And even trying to get asparagus from Badoogle all the way to the restaurant made me want to rip my hair out. And this entire year, I kept thinking, it is such a shame. I know that there are ingredients out there. I know that there are cooking techniques and cuisine out there that we haven't had access to and learn about. But those obstacles did not kill my curiosity. They only made it stronger. So after Room for Dessert, I decided to put 2 and 2 together, roughing it in the rural villages of this country in order to learn more about what's growing out there and what's cooking out there. Because really, I didn't know Indonesia at all. Bali, yes, but Indonesia, no. And it's my guess that most of you don't either, even the Indonesians. So Asli Food Project was born, a passion project that allowed me to explore the furthest reaches of Indonesia while using cuisine and produce as my ticket. And at the same time, it was important for me to share my experiences with all of you. So I aim to go to places that people didn't choose to go to. But I also didn't want to inflict any further agony on the behalf of my parents, who were thinking that they would have to call the U.S. Embassy and have me airlifted out of some jungle in the middle of nowhere. So I decided for my first trip to go to Sulawesi. And Sulawesi was like my gateway island. It was new to me, and there are still parts of it that are very much unexplored. But it was at least familiar in the sense that I was able to get contacts and tips before going. And it ended up being a fantastic 5 weeks of exploration. So for my second destination, I thought, okay, let's bump it up a notch. Let's really pick a place that isn't on the radar for most people. And I chose Kalimantan, specifically Kalimantan Tengah. And I chose one province because it would really take a whole lifetime to explore Kalimantan. It is enormous. And I ended up picking the middle province because I had found a research paper from 2013 titled Ethnobotanical Study of Local Vegetables Consumed in Central Kalimantan. And it came with a map and 42 plant species that they found. And I thought this could not be more fitting. This was going to be my scavenger hunt. So on May 15th of this year, I flew with a one-way ticket to Palangkaraya, the capital of Kalimantan Tengah, without knowing a single soul. So I spent 4 weeks in Kalimantan, and my first 2 weeks were utterly depressing. Not because the people weren't friendly, not because the food wasn't delicious, and not because I couldn't find places to go, but it had to do with my expectations and reality of Kalimantan's environmental status. Now, I knew what the situation was going in. I knew what to expect. There would be oil palm trees everywhere. The rivers would be filthy, and the economy would be dependent on the forces that created this environmental mess. I was not naive about this. Now, for those of you who love to go diving or to climb mountains, you know that feeling you get when you're at the depths of the ocean or have just reached the summit on top of the clouds? The one where you feel so small as a human being. When surrounded by the magnitude of nature, you just feel like a little speck. Well, my first trip out of Palangkaraya to a village, I saw how we, as humans, have become that larger force in this world. The rainforest was annihilated, and I know that is a strong word, but it is the only one that can accurately describe what I saw. Now, on that 4-hour drive, it was like a carpet of oil palm trees rolled out as far as you could see. Neat and tidy rows of the trees just everywhere. And sure, it was green, but it was completely unnatural. Every now and then I would see a patch of rainforest still left standing. These tall, scraggly tree trunks overlooking the landscape, very vulnerable and awkward, as if they were the things that were out of place. Now, the first few trips that I took out of the city, I was absolutely devastated. I felt real heartache. Is this how it looks when one of the oldest rainforests in the world is decimated and completely replaced by one plant? The stories and the photographs and the news really don't do the damage justice. So I spent the better part of these first 2 weeks almost mourning. I kept imagining all the wildlife and vegetation that was already lost. I kept thinking, was I too late? Was what I was looking for already gone? Well, I wouldn't be here in front of you today if the answer to that was yes. Thankfully, the last 2 weeks were filled with inspiration, hope, and redemption for this island. Now, I ended up going to villages that lived next to or were still surrounded by rainforest. As you can see here, the rainforest in Kalimantan has kind of been relegated to the top part of the province, and I spent most of my time in this area. So I started to get to jungle where orangutans still roam freely, where people still harvested plants and still hunted for animals like wild boars. I had really traveled back to a time and place where people still coexisted with nature in peace. My brain was on fire when I went to the pasars and markets here, even just walking on the road, because the amount of edible plants that I had not seen before was staggering. I love what the locals call the produce that they get from the rainforest. They call them sayur alam, so nature vegetable. I thought that was really perfect kind of phrase for what they do. But one of the most common things that they eat in Kalimantan is singka. So singka in Bahasa Dayak is umbut in Bahasa Indonesia, and in English that's translated to the soft inner core of a stem or a trunk. Now, the most common singka that the Dayaks eat is rotan or ratan, usually what you associate with outdoor patio furniture or woven products. So this is singka umbut, and the first person who saw that and thought I can eat that, I credit very much because I did not want to go near that. But basically what they do to harvest it is cut it, and they trim off the duri or the thorns on the side and bundle it up. And then to cook, you would just continue peeling the outside, and then you get to this very nice, soft, white, tender core. Usually they would cook it in a soup, or they would stir fry it, or you can even roast it on the fire and then peel off that outer layer and eat the inside. Now, another variety of singka rotan that they had is this. This is singka iri. So it's a little wider than the one before, and it's a tad more bitter than the previous one. Most rotan I found was very bitter in flavor, and it's amazing how the Dayak palate has really become accustomed to this, because many of the things that you get from the rainforest don't really taste great, but it's for sustenance, so they will eat it, and their taste buds have really changed because of this. This one is also rotan. This is Singka Rua. It looks very similar to the one before that, and I asked them, is this the same thing? They said, no, it's different, it's different. I was like, okay, it's different. But another example is this. So this is Singka Badang. So it's actually right here in front of us. This is coconut. So this is the soft inner core of the coconut tree. And when I first had this, it was in this soup. And it was delicious. They added a little bit of coconut milk, a little bit of pumpkin, and just slices of this. I'm still dreaming about this soup even now. It's delicious. You should really try it. This was also a big favorite. This is Singka Upon. So this has the taste very reminiscent to coriander or cilantro. It's much more mild, but the tender core, what they would do is just cut into little pieces and add to like stir fries of vegetables or soups. I would love to play around with this a lot more in the kitchen. I think we could do a lot with it. This is Singka Potok. So potok is ginger, but the variety that they have here is slightly different. When you peel it, the inside is this beautiful light pink core. The aroma and fragrance is still very similar to ginger flower, but a lot softer, a lot more palatable to some people who think ginger flower is too strong. Another thing that I saw was tabantao. So this is a vine that grows, and what they would do is just nip off the tip of the vine and just peel it. And it's very similar to talas. So talas is the runner of kalali, so taro. This is taro over here. So this is the part that's growing underground, kind of leading to create a new plant. And when it's fresh and when you peel it, it is exactly like asparagus. I kept thinking this is the asparagus of Indonesia. It was beautiful. They would stir fry it a lot. That's how I usually saw it, because when you cook it, it becomes very soft, but it's beautiful. I wish we could use that more here. There are also a lot of different kind of mushrooms in Kalimantan. They also have a season there, but while I was there, I saw kulat kritip. Now, this one's very special because it only grows on the rubber tree. And rubber trees are very common in Indonesia. It's a big industry here. But when the tree falls over and it's decomposing, this is the mushroom that grows on it. This little guy, when I found it in the jungle, was a little dried. But when you get it fresh, this is what it looks like. It's like a little lace fan. And the texture of it is very similar to tree here. So it has a little bit more of a bite, and it's not completely soft when you cook it. Now, all the leaves that are in the jungle, I swear there's a use for every single one, but this was one of my favorites. So this is daun sungkai. This is how they use MSG. This is like a natural MSG. They would say this is micin, what they use. So all they do is just add the leaves into their soup, into their stir fry, and it just enhances the flavor. I would really love to know the scientific chemical reaction of it all.
What you said? MSG?
Sungkai.
Yeah, but the function of it,
It's a flavor enhancer.
Oh, right.
Yes, so monosodium glutamate. This is it's like a natural version
So
of it.
you know the scientific name, but not the normal name.
The element would be probably glutamine,
The glutamine, yeah.
which is also often found in the core of the plant, the stem itself, is why that becomes so nutritious.
So they use this a lot in their cooking instead of using the man-made flavor enhancer. And then this one here is daun kalapimbing. So this imparts a sour flavor to a lot of their dishes. They cook this with ikan, with fish, with pork, and with chicken. And this, after cooking, you can also still eat it. Not like daun salam, where you have to leave it out. This one is also still edible after you cook it. And the fruits that you can find underneath the ground. So this one is a true survival food. If you are lost in the jungle, you find this plant and you uproot it, and you have these little fruits that you just rinse off, and you just kind of pinch off the top, and the inside looks like this. So the flavor is a lot like kiwi, kind of sweet, a little bit tart, but it was delicious. And these are only a small sampling of the things that I saw in Kalimantan. It was just amazing. I couldn't write down enough notes, I couldn't take enough pictures or videos. It was really, truly special to see all of that biodiversity. Now, in these 2 weeks is when I started learning more about the recipes of the Dayak Ngaju, the tribe that make up the majority population in Kalimantan, Thailand. And it was when I reflected on the ingredients and the techniques that they used, I could begin to understand why these recipes were created. I could even start to place them in the timeline of Dayak history. These recipes were a direct reflection of the changes in biodiversity, in agriculture, and migration. I learned about Kopu and Kenta in Kuala Kurun. It's a small city about 3 hours north of Palangkaraya. And I found that Dayak culture was much more prominent here because of its proximity to nature that was still quite untouched. So, Kopu. Kopu represents the starch that the Dayak Ngaju were eating before rice existed on the island. And because singkong grows everywhere, this root they had a steady supply of this root to eat. It was like their natural go-to food source. So to make this, they would always choose a young root. If you don't get a young root, you will be picking out fibers out of it for days. But all you do is take the root and you peel it, and then you just give it a chop through the middle. You can quarter it, but you really don't have to chop it up that much smaller. And then all you have to do is put it in a bowl, and then you cover it with water. You fill the bowl up until it covers the singkong completely. And you soak it until it gets completely soft. So this might take an average of 5 days. It really depends on the weather and the environment that you live in. But the main point is that you just want it to become completely soft. And then it's important to, every day, refresh the water. So take that water that's been soaking, water your plants, and then refresh it with fresh water because you're trying to keep it from fermenting so much. Fermenting is not the goal here. You just want to get it really fresh. Now, after you soak it, you'll be able to rip the singkong apart. And then after that, you kick out any fibers that you see left. And then at that point, when it becomes completely soft, it's going to be completely soft, like a pulp on its own. And then at this point, you want to wring it out. You want to wring it out, water completely. The locals there would use old rice bags a lot of times to do the job. Here you could use a thick towel. You could use one of those milk bags that you make nut milk or rice milk out of. All you want to do is make sure you get all of the water out. So that it starts to look like this. And after this, the next step is to continue to dry it. And then this is where techniques start to vary among the Ibus there. Some Ibus like to sun-dry it, which is toasting it on very, very low heat in a wok. Some Ibus like to dry it in the sun. One woman told me that she preferred to do the sun drying if she's going to store the kopu for a long period of time. And now a modern alternative is to use the oven at very, very low heat But regardless of the method, it's going to completely harden and turn into a crumble like this. So this can be saved and reserved until you're ready to eat it. And then the process to cook it is then very simple. So all you need is the dried singkong, some shredded coconut, some salt, and some sugar. Now you have to rehydrate the singkong when you're ready to use, and you only soak it for 2 minutes. You're very specific about this. Only 2 minutes, not a second more. After that, you strain it immediately, and then on a wok on very, very low heat is how you cook it. And here, yeah. So she's adding it to the wok, and it's very important to have it on low, low heat because you want it to remain white. That's the point. White and fluffy. And you don't want the starch to stick on the sides of the pan. So you have to continuously stir, continuously toss it as it's cooking so it doesn't stick. Because when it sticks, it burns and that bitter, acrid flavor gets into everything and then it just doesn't taste good. You can make kopu savory or sweet. Add a little more sugar, add a little more salt. It really depends on you. But in this case, we're going to make this batch on the savory side, so it'll go well with some of the other side dishes that you'll be tasting tonight. And it'll take roughly 10 to 15 minutes. It really depends on the size of your batch. So you, Liz, will be doing that. Okay. So as they're cooking this, when rice was introduced to the island, the financial prospect of planting it was causing the locals to start cutting down hectares of rainforest and converting it into paddies. And at first, when kopu was not so, or when rice was not so widespread, they would combine the rice with the kopu together to have a sufficient amount of starch to eat during meal times. But then when rice was prevalent, the making and consumption of kopu faded through the centuries. I asked the locals, do you still make kopu now? And the answer was a clear and definite no. If it's just sustenance that they're looking for, rice is always going to win. Because really, modern times and technology have made the process, the multi-day process of soaking and drying, very inconvenient and very useless for families. And with the invention of the rice cooker, you can have steamed rice ready within the hour, so what's the point? At every single water I went to in Kalimantan, I didn't see kopu. The ibu that showed me how to make this doesn't make it every day. The only reason I saw how to learn this was by introducing myself to locals over and over again that I'm a chef that's here to learn about Dayak cuisine, and this was specifically arranged for me to see. Otherwise, it doesn't really exist anymore. Yeah. Now, Kenta. So Kenta is a sweet rice snack, and it really represents Dayak Ngaju ceremony and culture once rice cultivation was widespread throughout the island. Now, once rice had a lot of value to it and they were planting it, as I said, they would cut down the rainforest and convert it into paddies. And at first, Dayaks could still maintain the health of the ecosystem by using shifting cultivation. So take one plot of land, plant on it for a period of time, move on to another plot, and allow enough time for the previous one to regenerate the nutrients in the soil. And rice flourished. The land was rich. The rivers and their tributaries provided good, clean water. So as a result, villages began to celebrate their rice harvests with ceremonies. And this is how Kenta came to be. Now, in this demonstration, I'm not able to show you the first process in person because it requires some equipment I could not fit into my backpack, so I still have captured wonderful video for you to actually still see. So Kenta is made from ketan. Ketan is white glutinous rice. You can also use the black variety, but it was more common to see the white. Now, using freshly harvested ketan is ideal, but if you have older ketan, you can just soak it overnight in water for the next step. Now, the next step requires the method sangrai. So the toasting over very, very low heat. And the heat is helping the grain separate from the husk and allows it to be flattened. And once it becomes so hot, it starts to pop like popcorn. And then when it starts popping is when you know it's ready. Now after this, they immediately transfer that hot rice into a wood bucket. And they carve this bucket out of the uling tree. And the uling tree is one of the most dense timbers in the world. And it's a very sacred tree and wood to the Dayak, because it is what they use to make their betangs, or their longhouses that they have, because it lasts for centuries. But in this step, it takes 3 people. So 2 people are pounding the rice, and 1 person is scraping the sticky grains off the side, so all the grains get the chance to be flattened. Some of them attach little bells to the top of their rods, so it almost sounds like music as they're doing it. And I have a few angles so you can really see. To really capture a rhythm here, so they continue doing this until the husk separates from the rice. And then once one batch is almost completely flattened, they transfer it to a tray to strip the husks out. So the air just takes it all out. I really have a lot of fun doing the slow-mo option on my phone. In the end, you get these completely flattened rice grains that almost look like oats. It was my first time seeing something like that. So then the actual preparation of it is super easy. So your ingredients are just the ketan, the flattened ketan, some freshly grated coconuts, some salt, some sugar, a little coconut water for some more flavor, and some hot water. So what you want to do is you can add your salt into your sugar. You add your hot water. All you want to do is dissolve. Just still want to dissolve the sugar and the salt to start. In this case, I'm using coconut sugar, but they were also using gula merah, or you can use gula pasir, which is white sugar. But in Indonesia, there are so many other more interesting sugars than just white sugar, so I always prefer you just add it to the kenta. Just give it a stir. add more liquid if you need. Add your coconuts. If it needs more liquid, you can continue to just add hot water, or some of them like to use coconut water to just add a little more flavor to it. And you just want to make sure it's completely mixed through. Now the texture of it can vary depending on the person making it. I had seen it very dry, almost like granola, and I had also seen it very wet and sticky to the touch. So really, it depends on your preference. And it's best after you give it a mix. I mean, it's very simple. It's mixing ingredients. But after you mix it, it's ideal to let it sit for just about 15 or 30 minutes to let the ketan completely absorb all of the liquid. Since the 20th and 21st century, especially in Kalimantan Tengah, the production of rice has decreased dramatically. The land has become very poor for several reasons. One, because shifting cultivation wasn't working anymore. They weren't waiting enough time between plots of land. And then also the oil palm trees began to monopolize all of the nutrients from the soil. And then also the rivers started to become so polluted, especially from the fertilizers coming from the oil palm tree and leaking into the water. And also the mining of minerals like gold, which would release chemicals like mercury into the water. Rice wasn't able to survive under these conditions, and so the production of it went down dramatically. Even now, in Kalimantan Tengah, they have to import their rice. Most of the rice that they eat is imported from other parts of the province, such as South Kalimantan, where rice is still growing. And the entire 4 weeks that I was there, I did not see a single paddy, not one. I covered a lot of ground, and I didn't see a single paddy. So as a result, villages didn't see rice as a viable cash crop anymore. And then there was no occasion to celebrate a rice harvest because there was none anymore. Even I started to see evidence of diminishing food culture in the generations of families while I was there. For example, when I first had Kenta, I was in Palangkaraya, and I was staying at a family's home. I asked the host, "Is there Kenta that I can try?" And he had some brought in, and as I was trying it, his grandson was like, "What is that? What are you eating?" And this boy is a fourth generation Dayak, about the age of 5, whose great-grandparents migrated from the village to the city. And he had no idea what Kenta was. I mean, it was right there in front of my face, the loss of culture and the loss of food tradition. But at least on that day, he learned with me. And today, you also learn with me. So, yeah. I just want to close by saying Kalimantan is a beautiful place. Despite the fact I spent the first 2 weeks mourning over what used to be, I managed to discover what still is. It's still alive. The food, the culture, and the nature. Out of the Dayaks that I met, they know what's happening to their worlds. they know that it's slipping away. And at this point, they need us to help make their traditions valuable again, at least valuable enough to preserve. So what can you do? My suggestion is visit. Pay a little bit of attention to this part of the country, because they will be more than happy to share all of their knowledge with you, and really downright ecstatic that you just even care. Because really what may seem like a small gesture to us, it means the world to them. So let's help them keep their world. Thank you.